Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Podcana episode 60. Here we are off the back of our first errata in the game. We have seen the downfall of Bucky finally, which we'll be talking about, of course. We also have a card reveal for the next set, and we're going to be talking about the recent Disney Lorcana challenge in Bochum and what that means for you looking forward to the set championships. Anyway, guys, I want to get your all's first reaction on the change to Bucky, and if Kawa, for our listeners and our viewers, if you could read it out for us what the change exactly was.
Yeah, sure thing. So Bucky has been errated. The new card reads he's a 3-cost inkable, still has those 1/1 stats, quests for 1, but has a new ability. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, if you used shift to play them, each opponent chooses and discards a card. And of course, the most notable change as well is that ward ability has been stripped off of Bucky.
Wow.
So not only has the ward been removed, the cost has increased, and the ease of discarding cards from your opponent's hand has also been increased. So the initial reactions I've seen from the community, in the most part, again, I'll get you guys' thoughts on it now, is if any one of these changes was made, people are saying that would be a huge impact. If it was increased to 3 costs and it still had the ward, still had the effect. I think if ward is probably the biggest thing to be stripped off. Like, I thought maybe they'd give it evasive instead of ward or something like that, but this is just like stripping off the card's ability in literally 3 different ways. So I don't know if it needed that much. I do think that they're trying to lean towards like the morph on 2, Bucky on 3, shift a card on 4 line, but I don't know if this card sees nearly as much competitive play as it has previously. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think it's too harsh? Do you think it's necessary? And also, do you think that this errata is better than a ban, a straight up ban of the card?
I was going to say hot take. Should have banned the card. So let's talk about erratas in paper card games. Because for me, when I look at this errata, this looks like a digital errata. This errata is not, I mean, there's multiple things being changed about the card. Like, there's almost no way you could, I don't know, it's very hard to remember, because not only is it increased by 1 cost, it loses its keyword ability in the form of ward, but the text is also different. Like, that card is so wildly different from its original printing that I feel like it's going to be very challenging for players to sort of navigate this. And I wonder what their solution is, if they actually plan to print a new version of Bucky in some sort of supplementary product or something like that, because it is a lot to manage. Usually when we see errata, so let's talk about errata in other games, in other paper games. So let's talk about Magic the Gathering, a very popular card called Impulse. So Impulse used to be 2 resources. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, pick one, put the rest at the bottom in any order, and then it said, the original printing said shuffle. And it was like, why am I putting them on the bottom in any order if I'm also shuffling? So they eventually took away the shuffle aspect of that. And it kind of makes sense. Like, if you ever cast Impulse in the old version of it, you would put the cards in order on the bottom as you would see fit, and then you would read the shuffle part, and you're like, this makes no sense. Why is this like this? And usually erratas are actually they're often clarifying like rules interactions based off like the way the card is worded. So something that you wouldn't even actually realize is wrong with the card. Sometimes they go ahead and errata it to sort of suit some rules interaction that doesn't fit the way it's currently templated. This is like the most extreme version of an errata. It's actually the most extreme errata I've ever seen in a paper card game. I don't have a ton of experience in paper card games, just Flesh and Blood and a little bit of Magic history, but this is a huge change. So before I pass over to Morin, I will say, to answer your question directly, my hot take is I believe we should have just banned the card. I understand why that is. I understand the detriment to that it might have a bit of blowback. People have, invest in this card. They enjoy this card, etc. But this is a lot to manage. I mean, this is 3 different things on a card that are wildly different.
Yeah, so I've also seen a drastic errata with the Sakazuki errata that I can talk about in a bit, but to me, I think I like that it's just errata and that the card doesn't get completely erased from the game. And I think the reason why maybe they've overdone it a little bit with the changes where now the card doesn't look also playable is because I think the last thing they would have wanted to do is errata the card and then still have it be problematic. So it's like kind of the safe route to kind of over nerf it in this way. So the leader that was playing in One Piece, it got banned and got reprinted in a different way. And the leader ability used to be that basically once per turn because you attack once per turn. So basically once per turn, you get to cost reduce something by 1, which helps you remove something. And also once per turn, you can trash a card from your hand to draw a card. And I think the new one is something like you can discard a navy card to cost reduce something by -1. So the cycling's gone, and the cost reduction also now needs you to discard a card, which is very similar to this, where it's like in multiple ways it's so much worse. Or the one that I sent you earlier, the Warsong Commander, which was
From
like an
Hearthstone,
amazing card and got nerfed and nerfed again. It used to give like other characters charge, and then in the end all it did was the characters that already had charge, which was attack immediately, just got +1 attack, which completely defeated its entire purpose. And I guess in comparison to both of those extreme erratas, maybe this is still like, it still kind of does the thing that it was doing before, but in a lot of ways it is much worse, and I don't expect it to at least see competitive play anymore.
Yeah. You compare this to sorry to interrupt you, Brendan. You compare this to a previous errata that's already come into Disney Lorcana, which is like the very basic one, kind of what you mentioned, similar to the Magic the Gathering example, is on specific. I specifically remember in set 1 there were some cards that had the support keyword, and in the brackets obviously it explains what the support mechanic does, and on the incorrect version of the card it said like you can give the attack to a chosen character, meaning you could basically give, when you quested with a card, you could give that attack to the same character, whereas they just errata that to say another chosen character. So the idea of support is you quest with a card, you give the attack of said card to another character, not to itself. You know what I mean? That's like a very basic example of an errata, and this is, yeah, I was joking with Raven earlier when this came out. I said, "Oh look, Lorcana got his first OTA." I wanted to piggyback off of what Moyen said, because Flesh and Blood is also a hero-based game, kind of like One Piece is, and they've had some significant hero erratas, one in particular, and the hero is definitely different. But because it's a hero and it's not opened up in a normal booster like a Bucky is, and you don't play 4 of them, they actually just reprinted them as promos that they gave out at conventions that showed up in sort of like what would be your Lorcana League. They gave them out, kind of for free, and ultimately, like, the new version was very accessible and it was very easy to swap out, and the errata wasn't too painful. I feel like when you attack a card that is played like this in like a 4 of, that is not this like singular starts in play, stays in play kind of hero thing, that it does become a lot more, there's a lot more sort of weight and kind of debt that you accrue by having this massive change from the original design of the card. Also, when we talk about the Warsong Commander, I mean, for digital games, I think that they can pretty much do whatever they want. I would say in Marvel Snap is probably the most extreme example of this, where we look at Warsong Commander and Hearthstone, it's like the exception, right? It's like, oh, look what they did to this card. They completely changed it. In Marvel Snap, that's par for the course. That's just another Tuesday. They changed the card to, you paid $100 effectively, or 6,000 tokens for a card. And, 3 months later, it's a completely different card. It's totally unplayable. I would say they're the extreme where it's actually, it kind of sucks, to be honest, sometimes. But, digital card games can really get away with anything. This, on the other hand, I do think this is going to add kind of a lot of tension. I think that ultimately the game it'll be fine. People will get used to it, and it won't be that big of a deal. But it really does hurt the sort of kitchen table sort of play of the game. But that being said, if you're sleeving up some starter decks, you maybe find a Bucky in a pack, you throw it in your deck, and you're playing on the kitchen table, and you play with original Bucky. I mean, who cares? Like, who cares? It doesn't really matter, right?
They'll be fine.
Yeah, they will be fine.
Also, they kind of got away with one, because while maybe people were emotionally attached to Bucky, somewhere, at least it's like a 2-cent card, so no one really lost money because now their Bucky isn't worth anything anymore.
Do we think those set 2 Bucky promos are going to start skyrocketing in value? Yeah,
that happened in Flesh and Blood, where the original premium version of the card that got errata did go up in value quite a bit. Becomes like a bit of a collector's item.
So everyone hold your foil Buckies, for sure.
Yeah. So I want to kind of get a conclusive answer from you guys in regards to how this affects the power level of Bucky. I'll go ahead and start here. I want to say, so I'll preface this with, I think that the original design of Bucky was I could get on the side of that it's unfun. If you asked me to give you my biased take, I think the card was immensely unfun, but that's not really relevant. I believe that, one man's trash is another man's treasure when it comes to gameplay in TCGs, and I will give credit where credit is due that, what I find is fun is maybe not what other people find is fun, and that is okay. But I think in terms of design, I absolutely think that Bucky was limiting design. It was going to be a card that was going to be problematic in perpetuity, and I do think that this discard archetype in general is overshadowing what I hope Emerald can become in the future. I do think that discard is a very, it's not an aspect of gameplay that I enjoy, and I think when it becomes powerful enough and popular enough, it leads to kind of a general metagame that people, I would say card game players on the aggregate do not enjoy. Of course, there are players that love green steel, that love the discard archetype, but it's funny because there's a very recent and current example in another very popular trading card game, which is Magic the Gathering. If you looked at the modern format a few months ago, particularly before Modern Horizons 3, even like the previous Modern Pro Tour, it was dominated to an extent by a card called Grief, which is a card that would let you could basically play it for free by evoking it, so sort of discarding another card, and it would sacrifice itself, but your opponent would discard a card, and then they would have to discard a card when it entered. And what you would do is you would basically like reanimate it out of the graveyard with these cheap effects, and it would come back into the battlefield, back into the battlefield, back into the battlefield, and your opponent would be like turbo discarding. They called it like a scam archetype, but it was very unfun. It was very uninteresting, I think, after a while. Of course, when it was new, it was maybe cool because it was like this new way to interact with the game, but I think people got burnt out of it pretty fast. That same card right now in the legacy format of Magic the Gathering, which is a older, larger card pool than Modern even, like that card is also dominating that format. And it is because this discard, and people hate it. And the main reason people hate it is not only because it's powerful, but just the reduction of decisions in card games is kind of a weird pillar of design. It's a weird place for a singular, what we have now to be a singular sort of piece of the color pie being Emerald, to be almost completely reliant on, which is where it feels like we are right now. So I'm happy to see us moving away from that, which is what this feels like.
I think I agree with you. I think not only did did Bucky limit design space, I think it overshadowed the potential of all of the other Emerald cards. I mean, we're even seeing recent reveals now, right? Like the big, I think it was like the 9-cost Robin Hood and stuff. Like I when Bucky was the previous version, I found it hard to get excited about cards like that because I'm like, why would anyone want to play? I mean, you could play them. I'm sure it's fun, but I'm a competitive player, right? I'm like, why would I even entertain a card like that when Bucky exists and this discard package is just so powerful? So I hope that because of this change, my hope is that Emerald gets to explore a different direction. And if there's some discard elements kept in the deck, I think that's fine. I think if you take Bucky out, like Percy, I think that Ursula, the 2-cost Ursula, the 1/3 that discards a song from the opponent's hand, is an extremely effective card that's been added to this game. It keeps so many decks in check, and it's like just a great card all around. I think the potential to have a card that you can then shift onto, like, you've played this 1/3, it does a powerful effect, it's then just kind of this useless body, but then you could potentially shift onto it as well. I think keeping cards like that around are like super good. Prince John, now that Bucky isn't here, you could still play a Prince John deck. I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's not going to be like absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, I'm
talked about it as well.
Yeah.
We talked about the issues with Bucky. I think the fundamental issues were obviously design of perpetuity, but also there's particular issues with Ward. So Ward is okay on like 6 costs and things that need to tap, like Kuzco, but you have this like triple whammy of it's cheap, it has Ward, it has a static effect where it doesn't need to tap, and also it just gets more and more powerful every set as cards synchronize with it. It's like the whole card was just I think that fundamentally it was just kind of a problem. I think that each of those mechanics in a vacuum can be balanced in a way where they can be interactive and fun, but Bucky was just like a sort of cyclone of all of these things coming together where you just like could not do anything in a reasonable amount of time before Bucky accrued what was too much value. In my opinion, I want to. There was the original question I asked, which is where do you think the car lies now? And I just want to give my answer and pass over to you guys, which is I think the car is absolutely decimated. I think the car is unplayable.
I think the card is decimated and unplayable. I think Emerald Steel, on the other hand, might be able to adapt to try to figure out a new non-Bucky version that could fit the meta. I think because in set 3, the preferred version was without Bucky, and I think it might still at least be fine, or at least be decent enough where in the future sets it could rise up again. And the other point I wanted to make is basically, I think Emerald both set 3 and this set has been a strong color that went a little unexplored because a lot of fun, good things that you could do with the color didn't really compare to playing Emerald Steel with the Earthstar synergies, but also the Bucky with the Floodborn package and Steel. And I just hope maybe we'll get to see some other ways and other ways to play Emerald and other color combination that we haven't really seen before.
Mm-hmm. And Colin, do you agree that the card is very
Yes.
is
100%. Yeah.
That's. I think we're all there, and I am excited for the future of Emerald, and even the Emerald Steel color combination as we move forward.
Brendan still wasn't happy though when we told him he saw this change and he was really, really happy, and then we're like, yeah, this isn't going to be effective pretty much until Toronto for tournaments. He's like, what the hell? So
I wanted Dallas to be the DFW one to be. I actually think the meta game is in a pretty healthy point right now. Like after playing said championship this past weekend, I think the meta's in a pretty good place. Like we talked about, okay, the meta's less diverse. There's 4 really, really good decks, but I think there's a good push and pull between a lot of those decks. I'm starting to think that maybe Ruby Amethyst is kind of like edging it out there a bit, just in terms of like the best deck. But yeah, I mean the play pattern specifically against Emerald Steel. If we were 5 more sets in, I would be over it. Right now, I'm getting a little bit over it, but we're kind of 2 sets into this like turbo discard thing. I can deal with it, but if this becomes the dominant archetype of Emerald for the next 2 years, no thanks, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
You got a card reveal for us?
Yeah. The next thing we're gonna do, guys, is we've got an exclusive card reveal for
looking at this for the first time, by the way.
Yeah. So
Kawa did not show us. Yeah.
I have not shown these boys this card yet, and I will be the first to say. Usually, we get a card reveal, and these 2 guys say they have a bit of a laugh, they have a meme. And they say, "Oh, Kawa, what do you think about this card? Is it good or is it bad?" I am going to tell you. I will also say, I think in the past we've had pretty mediocre card reveals, right? We got a legendary card to reveal to you guys.
Wild.
And I think this card is
now?
absolutely insane. Yeah, scroll down. So,
card we're revealing. The art is phenomenal.
Card we're revealing is Mufasa, Ruler of Pride Rock. It's a Sapphire card, 8 cost, uninkable, 4/9. It quests for 4. It's a Storyborn, Mentor, and King. Has an ability, a Delicate Balance. When you play this character, exert all cards in your inkwell, then return 2 cards at random from your inkwell to your hand. It has another ability, Everything the Light Touches. Whenever this character quests, ready all cards in your inkwell. Initial impressions. Go.
So actually, my initial impressions the art is pretty sick on this card. I actually really like it. I'm happy we got a Sapphire card too. Yeah. So quest for 4/9. I
want to say, man, this is like very, very initial. I think if this card was inkable, it'd be one of the best cards in the game. If this card was inkable,
I would say inconclusive. Seeing the card for the first time, but my initial thought was that I kind of feel like this card needs ward. I don't know.
Are you that scared of an Ice Block Medusa? Really?
No, the Maleficent and
Maleficent.
Stuff. I don't know. So no, I love the card. It's to me. So this is this type of card is like a value bomb. It's not something that even swings back the tempo immediately. It's not something that immediately wins you the game, but it's this type of card where you can. If you can keep up with tempo and get this out, that this card, like, you don't 1-for-1 with this card. Even if you trade this card, suddenly your opponent got 2 cards back from their inkwell. So this would fit a deck where you keep up in the early game and then you also ramp a little bit. Then you cheat this out, or you don't even need. This stuff doesn't need to hit the board early. If you have stabilized, then maybe if you just have this in the late game. That will be hard to keep up with. And then, of course, if this if this sticks for just a single turn,
yeah, game's over, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, if let's just say an example, right? And I don't even know if this would be one of the best examples, but current kind of Sapphire decks, right? Let's say this card does stick. We quest. This card sticks. We happen to have 8 ink. We'll play a Tamatoa. Let's say we have a few items. We'll quest with Mufasa. You could basically do Tamatoa and Dime on the same turn, and that sounds pretty good. So
yeah, I mean, it is very good. My first inclination is actually to maybe not play this in that deck. Actually, okay, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I would like to play this card for free. I would like to somehow cheat this card out.
This is what I was thinking as
like
well.
a Mufasa or something. Yeah. I would love to like Mufasa this card.
I was thinking of I don't know. I was probably thinking too much, but I was like, are there any cheap Mufasas that I could do like the stupid Hades thing where you sacrifice a? But there's no. I don't think there's any cheap Mufasa cards. But yeah, like if there's a way to cheat this card out, or like even maybe not like traditionally as Sapphire does ramp into it, even though that's kind of what the card wants you to do, but. What's those like kind of ramp cards in Amber, right? Like the Heart of Atlantis, where you tap it and you get -2 reduction, play a card, cheat something out. Seems interesting.
Yeah. So the problem with cheating it out very early is like you also lose 2 resources.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you can use each resource like kind of twice, maybe, and this will push for game very quickly. That might make up for it. I just wanted to put that out there that maybe immediately losing 2 resources is a little hurtful.
Yeah.
I think, but Ruby Sapphire seems like a good fit because it's the type of deck in its current iterations, both Sapphire decks, from the 2 Sapphire decks, I think it would fit Ruby Sapphire better because it's the deck that really, it doesn't play Holy Word. It has to often ink most of their hand to ramp. And then only keep maybe a Flower Charm or something. So sometimes you will be forced, or a lot of the time you will be forced to ink a Maleficent Dragon or Tamatoa, and to really hyper accelerate. And then after you did that, and then maybe wipe the board or play Maleficent, and if you then on top of that on low hands, I suddenly play a Mufasa, get some extra threat into your hand. I think that's at least in the current set where I would really see this card shine.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about, like, I wonder if there's, like, any OTK kind of combinations with this, because, you know, when you untap this, maybe you can make a quest again, and then, yeah, I mean, you're getting, like, basically, like, infinite ink, like, I don't know. It's kind of wild.
Well, you can't, there's no, like, ready this card and it can't quest again, right? It's just, like, you just ready the card. So
no, there's one.
I think there's one.
There's an aerial when you play an item ready.
Yeah, no. I'm
then
saying,
you go Eye of the Fates, bang, bang.
I'm saying for this card specifically, like there's no way to quest with this, ready this, and quest with this again, so you just have infinite ink. Like that. Obviously, there's not, right? That would literally break the game. So,
well, that's what we like to do. Let's talk about what's wrong with this card. I do think this is an exciting card, and I do think this is probably the coolest.
Oh, here he is. He has to bring us down on something. My God, yeah.
Let's talk about what's wrong with this card. So 8 cost uninkable. The current 8 cost slot is filled with Tamatoa. The Tamatoa item package is very, very powerful in this game. Tamatoa does get... So there's one key heuristic in Lorcana that we should evaluate most cards against, but in my opinion, almost every high cost card, and that is impact as soon as it hits the battlefield. So definitely not impact on the next turn, because once we get up into those later stages of the game, we get into those later stages of ink, cards cannot be relied on to sort of survive a singular turn if they have this game-winning effect and they don't have something like ward. So this is actually kind of a double trouble, right? Because not only does it not give you value when it impacts the battlefield, it actually gives you what is theoretically minus value. So it is actually bad value because you're returning 2 cards at random from your inkwell, and that is seen as a downside here.
No, I think at that stage of the game, is it not an upside?
I think it is an upside. It's going to be like drawing a card, but I think if you were curving it out on 8, it might be a downside because you go back to 6, and like 8 is like a key one. But if you're at like 15 and you top deck this 15 ink, and I think that would be nice. I think it's seen as a downside. I mean, a heuristic of card games in general is if you can find a card that has a significant downside and is pushed as a result of that, and you can turn that downside into an upside. That's how you get broken cards. A 4/9 is a great amount of willpower to have. It's going to be very resilient to actual combat damage killing it. It's going to need most likely removal effects to get rid of it. Questing for 4 is also extremely impactful. And of course, the quest readying all of the cards in your inkwell is absolutely nuts. So I think this is like play this on the battlefield, theoretically lose value. If it survives a singular turn, it wins the game. I do think that, speaking to, again, what is potentially wrong with the card, for attack, we could get that Icebox, get a Medusa. Medusa is a very dominant card in this game. But also, I think that the power level of Lorcana in general is going up, and what is sort of inversely correlated to that power is the cost of cards. The cost of cards is going down. I think we are moving away from these higher cost cards unless they have immediate impact and are doing something that's very powerful and very synergistic to what we're doing. And I think that some of the outliers, some cards that are outliers that I think are actually maybe even being power crapped out of the game right now are things like Maleficent, Monstrous Dragon, because that's an inherent 2-for-1, has a high attack value, and dominates the board when it hits. But even that is getting a little bit too expensive. And I think you only see it played in some of the ramp decks, and even there, it's starting to be very expensive. So, I think as Lorcana ages and get more and more sets, like 8 cost uninkables are going to demand a very, very high price to be played, and I'm not sure that this kind of meets that criteria quite yet. And I find myself, when I look at deck building in this game, to be going lower and lower in cost as the sets move on.
Just one last thing I want to note about the card is that sequencing is also very important about this card. If you play this card immediately and you do have some spare ink left over, that's it, right? You know what I mean? So this is pretty much the last thing that you want to be doing on your turn. If you've got other things to do these first and then do the Mufasa. Another thing to note is, say, for example, you do have a dime out on board already, and you play this Mufasa, and you haven't inked something in your hand, you can ink a card, and then maybe if you have a Fishbone Quill, if you have enough cards in your hand, that is... Actually, no, you will, of course, right? Because you'll be returning 2 cards to your hand. If you happen to have a Fishbone Quill on the board, you can ink something, and then ink something with Fishbone Quill, and then tap the dime. So, just stuff like that to be aware of, is that sequencing is important with this card, not to kind of instantly throw this down and be like, oh, I've no ink left, right? So I think that is important as well. But I'm excited. I think it's cool. I think between this and the other legendary Sapphire card that we've seen, which was the Merlin, where I think if the card shifts, you can just tutor any card from your deck. Maybe, we could see some type of combo deck or there's a lot of other cards we're yet to see from Set 5, but I'm pretty excited by this one for sure.
To piggyback off of that, I do think that those combos are more and more likely to exist / already do exist in Lorcana. I find that again, to speak to my point about costs decreasing, the margins in Lorcana have started to become super, super thin on turns like 1 through 4. And it feels like you need to be impacting the board and taking extremely relevant game actions in turns 1 through 4, or like your sort of top end cannot matter. Because, for instance, like we can take a sort of pillar of the metagame in the form of Ruby Amethyst. Like if you're not committing to board and they go Flynn Rider, maybe Sisu Castle, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
It's really tough to deal with. And it asks a huge question in this metagame right now. So yeah. More anything else to say in regards to this card?
No, I like I think it's a very good point that with Quill you can actually dime target this, because at least then you're not slowing your opponent down, but gaining 4 lore is immediate impact still. And I think that seems like a very important interaction where you can actually play this Ink 2 with a Quill, or 1 with a Quill, 1 for turn, and get the 4 lore in already. One thing that you did say is, okay, if it sticks, you just win the game. I guess you also need something meaningful to do with that 2 turns of ink, basically. So even then, maybe there will be times where
makes you think about a whole new world, right? Like a whole new world seems more synonymous with this kind of ability than not. Yeah. Yeah.
With whole new world, you will be able to do some crazy, almost like 2 turn worth of actions. I'm just nothing against the last cards we got to reveal, but I'm super happy about this one.
Yeah. This one is great, by the way. I think it's our responsibility to give the upsides and the downsides, but I would say overall, if we ask our net opinion, I'm much more excited about this card than the other cards we've gotten. I think this card is really, really cool. I sometimes get overexcited about cards that might not be super playable in the metagame, but just look really fun. For instance, Milo. Milo was I was like, fuck yeah, this card looks sick. Didn't ultimately impact the game too much, but this is kind of on a similar level for me.
Also, okay, I think this is one of the most exciting cards that I've seen so far. At the same time, I think the last 2 cards, the 2 cards maybe that I overrated the most from last set were Milo Thatch, the 7 cost. That didn't have that had some impact when it hit the board, but not enough. and the 6-cost Hydra that just has 0 impact when it hits the board, but it's like a very good proactive tool. But at least with the 6 drops that we had right now, you were never really wanting to play a Hydra over that. So
I think we can learn some good lessons from that too.
Yeah, and this one will also, like, you will need to do the work before this hits the board so that you can actually freely play this. The downside's definitely there, but so is the payoff.
Yeah, I want to give a huge shout out to Ben from the UK Ravensburger team for hooking us up with this. He specifically held this card for us because he felt like, as a competitive podcast, we would have a lot to say about this card. So yeah, once again, shout out to Ben. Thank you for giving us a very, 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 very good card.
I love this rarity of cards in Lorcana. By the way, I feel like most sets. If you wanna know the story of the set and the essence of the set, you just look at this rarity, and I feel like you have like archetype defining cards like at that rarity and deck defining cards that you can build around. And I think this is one of those cards.
One of my favorite things to do now is because you return 2 cards at random from your inkwell to your hand. I can't wait for a player to like start shuffling 15 cards from their inkwell, and then just your opponent has to choose 2 randomly. I think that's gonna be fun. I think this card would be absolutely bonkers if you could like lift up your inkwell and you could see and you could choose specific cards. That would be insane.
You know what I would have liked to see actually?
Tell us.
Maybe a little bit cheaper, but I think it would be potentially extremely degenerate. But basically, when this hits the battlefield, return all of your inkwell to your hand.
What? Really?
It's a huge downside. That would be a huge downside. The card would be extremely unplayable outside of a very, very specific deck, in which case that deck would accrue sort of ramp throughout the game. It would play a card like this. It would have access to like multiple fishbone quills, things like that. And then it would just basically play like a 15 card hand at one point.
Isn't there cards like that in Hearthstone where it's like you like spend all of your ink to summon like 2/2s, and then once they die or whatever, you just can't.
You get them back.
You get them back.
That's living mana. Yeah. So, and I mean, I guess in lots of games, I think this type of effect exists, where it's like sacrifice X of that resource to do this effect, and sacrifice all of your resources, the most extreme variant of that. But there could also be something like, I don't know, put 2 of your inkwell into the discard to do this. So, some effect like that is definitely interesting design space.
Yeah. Or what was it? Astral projection. Discard your hand and gain 10. But that's kind of different than this game because 10 is like the max amount of mana that you can usually.
There's no maximum.
Have. Yeah.
Moin, would you the card I just described? If that was how a delicate balance read, do you think that card would be playable, and do you think it'd be broken?
But, so the card says
enter the battlefield, return all of your inkwell to your hand.
Yeah, okay, how much does it cost? What stats does it have? What does it do?
Let's say it costs the same. It has the same stats.
No, it would be unplayable.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a much better version of that. We get some of the resources, but we still have resources to actually play out those cards. I think something that would return all of your resources would need to like clear the entire board and then threaten to win the game over the next few turns.
Yeah, it's cool. This is also very interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say, like, return all of your ink and then, return all of your ink to your hand, but like gain a lore for each one return.
Oh, that'd be busted. That'd be busted. I do want to point out that this card is fundamentally new design space. I believe. I don't think we've seen any sort of returning like collectively putting your ink together and returning a random card. So it kind of represents a whole new like game design aspect of Lorcana.
In multiple facets, no? Do we have anything that readies cards in Inkwell?
I don't think so, no. So this is kind of two new design spaces, yeah.
So in multiple ways, this is completely new.
It's a sick card. I really appreciate the Ravensburger giving us this one to reveal. Because even if the card, even if this card doesn't end up being super impactful in the metagame, and it is like Milo, it's a card we can get excited about, but maybe just doesn't currently meet the criteria for the power level of the game, especially the sort of ink curve of the game. Like from a design perspective, I mean, this card should just get you more excited about Lorcana itself because it's showing you more ways to sort of interact with the game system than we've seen yet.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, no shade being thrown towards Dinglehopper, last ditch effort, and the 2-3.
Dinglehopper. It wasn't even Dinglehopper. It was like
Was it not
was it Wildcat's Wrench? Yeah.
Can I tell you guys a funny story?
But what's the 2-3 called that we revealed? The
LeFou.
So I have a story about LeFou because you guys actually rated LeFou kind of high. I was at a game store. I was testing for Atlanta, and it's actually Hal Brady. So he's a content creator. Podcana. I've done videos on his channel. I was like, "Hey, what card are you excited for?" And he goes, "Oh, the new LeFou." I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I had no idea, by the way. And he goes, "Oh, it's like this 2-3 that you can play for free." And I was like, "Dude, that's our spoiler."
No, but also, first of all, I don't think we were overly excited. I think we highlighted all the upsides that it could potentially have because that's what we are supposed to do.
Yes,
I highlighted the downsides.
Of course, that's what
Thank you for
Brandon
that.
is supposed to do.
You did it very well. And also, we played against some of the content decks, like exciting decks. I think it was a red-green deck that was playing the 2-3 because it was playing lots of 3-cost Song. And that deck's not like the most competitive, but it was fine in that deck. It was with Strength for Raging Fire.
I also, just talking about some of our cards that we revealed, we had a very cool experience. I think it was our last day in Bochum. One of the nights we were in a room and we were playing with a lot of the Ravensburger staff, and it was really, really fun. And I just remember, I think you were in on these games, Moin. So they were we were kind of doing like this pack rush where you open 2 packs and then you kind of just play with whatever cards you got. And I just remember my fiance Kim screaming that like she actually used last-ditch effort to kill something. I was screaming from across the room saying, "Chris, it's your card. You reveal it actually did something." And she was she was so happy that that card was actually good. But I again, like, what's funny is in certain formats like sealed and draft, I think some of those cards are actually fine. Like, do you know what I mean? So
this card that we just spoiled would be crazy in sealed and draft, I think.
If you can get up there though, right? If that's what you're saying, right? If the power level and power creep is a thing,
I feel like draft frequently goes there. I think that draft is like a super grindy format in general.
I haven't played enough. I haven't played enough draft. I've played more sealed. Yeah. Okay, so
I think draft and sealed. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna move on to our spilled ink section. The first one is from 1st to 20. Haven't watched yet, but damn, I was trying to keep Pegasus under wraps for set champs. I'll forgive you since I love you guys. Moin, what was your experience? I know you tested with Pegasus. Did Pegasus actually make it into your Ruby Sapphire list for Bochum in the end?
No, and so many like of the Ruby Sapphire specialists,
truthers,
they really liked it, and I tested it a lot, and I can't say that I did. It had some niche lines against red purple that helped a lot. If you go like Pegasus on 2 to keep Flynn in check, then sing 1 jump, play Quill while having played a 1-cost item that like doesn't draw. So like, and then it like double keeps it in check, and that does help a lot. And then on top of that, after that, you have like very little cards, and you also need like card draw engine to then also keep pushing for your own game plan. So so does that. It does. You can throw it onto the board later to protect against BK. You can play it early and use it just for 3 damage and B-Quink protection. So it does some things, but it's still like in Ruby Sapphire, using an entire card for something like that in the same turn slot that is 1 jump ahead. I don't think it really helped enough. Also, when you consider all the other matchups, I don't think it helps against Emerald Steel at all. I think sometimes if you have nothing better to do, you will play it to contest the Diablo, and sometimes it will help, sometimes you get punished. But even in that matchup, it's not a good card. It's not good in the mirror or against Sapphire Steel. So I personally, I don't think even though it helps a bit against Red Purple, I don't think it helps enough if you consider the entire matchup spread. The way I ended up playing the deck in the end, because I also didn't think, I think the 3-cost Caesar was somewhat in a similar spot. So the way I ended up taking for the matchup was just playing a Vitalisphere, which was great. A Shield of Virtue, which was decent. It does other things while being, so both of these things, both of these techs, they help for red purple, but they're not bad in the other matchups. In the other matchups, they're inkable 1-cost items. Shield of Virtue definitely has some utility outside of that. So does Vitalisphere, and then also one of Scar. And they performed really well. I had one series against red purple where I was dead lost both games, but then I had to like Scar, clear a few characters, and hit the castle, and shield my Scar, hit the castle again, and Diamond. And suddenly I was completely winning. In the end, I ended up losing both of those games on 19 lore, which was a shame with how the games went after that.
Do you want to talk about?
I was really happy with.
Do you want to talk about how you lost one of those games? I know it's probably a sore spot, but I think that, like I didn't watch the game, but I heard about it, and it sounded like it was an absolutely insane match.
Yeah, the entire match was extremely back and forth and very, very high level, and it was probably my favorite series I've ever played, even if I got too old in that series. And yeah, the first game where my opponent also went first that game, and I was this close to winning it. I was on 19 lore with a dime on the board. And my opponent only goes to 19 on board. They don't have a goat in hand because I knew it from their previous turn. And then on 11 ink, they go, rabbit, don't find the goat. Draw their own rabbit to find the goat on the last possible draw to go to 20. And then the other game was, they play a goat to go to 19, but with my dime, I can only go to 19 because I don't find the out that would quest for more than 2. After I had on my previous turn with 4 cards in hand, no dime target. I had like Quill, 1 jump, Maui, Quill. Yeah, and then so I couldn't threaten over 2 unless I also get into a. And like both of those games, I saw around 55 out of 60 cards. So I didn't go through 55 cards, but like at the end, so many cards on the bottom of the deck I put there. So in both of those games, I almost saw my entire deck. And I had a lot of fun playing that. It was against someone that was new to Lorcana, but they were like accomplished in all other card games, and also top 32 the One Piece European finals.
I had a similar Ruby Amethyst matchup in my. I also went 0-2, but it was in a set championship, and the second game was just an absolute slog. And my opponent was very high on lore for a very long time, and I'd been attritioning them out. They'd been attritioning me out, but I had cast 7 in combination Develop Your Brains and How Far I'll Go. So I had opted 7 cards to my deck. There were cards that I ended up very much needing towards the end of the game, and I was getting close. So I ended up there was 9 cards left in my deck. So I was 2 cards away at the end of the game. But at the bottom of my deck, I had 2 of my 3 Be Prepared and 2 of my 2 dimes. And I was like, at some point I realized as I'm getting lower and lower in my deck, I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to get to these cards. And these are my actual win conditions to win this game. And it was just an epic game. But yeah, same thing. I guess in that game, I saw 58 of 60 cards. It was a long one. I thought I was gonna mill for a second. I was like, wait, what? Oh god. It was pretty fun.
Yeah. The next comment is from N Groove. As always, awesome podcast, guys. Recently, you've been talking about how important openers are and how they've impacted some of your playtesting. Is there significance in an opener being 4 turns? For example, is it related to what you can hold in Mulligan or about playing on curve? Also, do you feel like these openers are usually static, such that you're only making ink decisions the first 4 turns if you have the appropriate opener for the matchup? So I think like one of the best examples is probably what you said, Brennan, right? It's like the Flynn Rider, the Sisu, the castle, yeah.
The RA opener. Is there significance to being 4 turns? I think that RA in particular, when they have that 4-turn curve, I believe the game is often decided there. It's not literally decided, but you either answer that question or you don't, because you have a diverse amount of threats on the battlefield that are gaining an obscene amount of lore, and you have a diverse, I would say, diverse in terms of characters and characters versus locations. You also have locations on the board that is accruing lore value, and that is also potentially going to draw cards as you move into turn 5. So there's no significance to turn 4. We just found that Ruby Amethyst, like versus Red Blue, like the critical, am I going to just straight up lose this game, or are we going to play a competitive game, was in the first 4 turns, because Blue Red was doing something similar where it was like, okay, do you have turn 1 item? If not, okay, but do you have turn 2 one shot head? Very, very important. Do you have turn 3 Flaversham on said item? And now in this set, do you have something like turn 3 Tala to stop the Flynn, etc.? So we didn't pick it for any reason. We just found that, felt like games were huge, very, very impactful on the sort of that 4-turn curve. More in your thoughts?
I think in general, it doesn't have to be exactly 4. I think for like something like Sapphire Steel, maybe it's more like 5-ish turns where it's really like the opening. But I think the biggest reason for why you don't want to think about the turns after that really as the opening is because then there's a million different openings. Like after turn 4, the play lines diversify more than in the first few turns, and then it doesn't really help to think about all of the different turn 5s after the first turn 4s as an entirely different opening.
Yep, 100%. I totally agree with that. So yeah, the idea, I actually saw some other content creators talking about this on Twitter. I don't know if they got it from us or like they've just come to the same conclusion, but they were also like, oh, the biggest level up in Lorcana is to think about openers like chess. And I was like, yes, that's it.
Brandon's like, I've heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And if anybody's listening, this is the first time you're listening, you're like, oh, why? It's a card game. It's because the mulligan is super powerful, and all the cards, for the most part, like, you know, you have replacement level cards in regards to like what you can ink. So it's like that card can kind of be anything. Like you're just looking for these 4 cards to play, or like these 3, you know, X number of cards to play in your opener, and that opener asks like why question to your opponent. And in terms of like resources, like Magic, where they have to be lands, it's like they can be like 80% of the cards in your deck because like, you know, X% are inkable at this point. So it's like it just is TLDR. It's extremely consistent. Consistent.
Now that you say it, in one of my opponents in Swiss, they were new to card games, but they were a long time chess player. They didn't know about us or the podcast, and they also said, you know what the skill I that transferred the most? It's like openings. And I also had to smirk a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, another example of that is like the whole, like what Green Steel does. It's like you just have this opener, you have the Diablo, the Bucky, the Shift Diablo, and there's like the further step, right? So then if you have that opener, does your opponent have the Brawl, the Boom to answer? If you have the Let the Storm Rage on top of it, then like, you know, like the amount of times when I was against RA and they did like the Flynn Rider on 2, and then on my turn 2, I went, you know, Bucky, Shift Diablo, Storm Rage on, kill the Flynn, and it's like, okay, and if I've seen the hand and they don't have a Brawl, it's like, wow, like what do they do, you know?
So there's an additional theory that goes on top of that, which is that, so if you think about your opener or your series of openers that ask a very specific question to your opponent, like let's say the question to your opponent is like, it's something super polarizing, which is like, okay, it's a Diablo opener, your opponent literally has to have something like Brawl or they lose. So you could like look at your deck and look at the like the sequence of the number of openers that are in that line. So it's like maybe it's like replacement level, you know, turn 2, please, but ultimately you're going like you're going 1 cost or the Diablo into Shift Diablo, and your opponent has to have this exact answer by 3. Like you're kind of doing a bit of an arbitrage on the math as well, because you're saying, okay, me on the play, my deck is X% likely to have these cards, and those cards could just be Diablo 1 cost and Diablo in action, so you can shift it, and then all the other cards are like replacement level value, and like I'm at some X% to get that, and my opponent needs to have this specific answer, so Y answer, and their deck is, you know, Y% to be able to have that answer. They also do that in not having information, but their Y% to find the answer can potentially be a lot lower than your X%. So it's like, oh, my opener is just like, this is just a strong opener. Like I'm just going to ask the question to my opponent here. So you're kind of like arbitraging like the sort of potential for, you know, you to have the powerful thing versus your opponent to have the answer and actually to be able to stabilize. I think like the Diablo is a bit more straightforward there, but when you go into like Ruby Amethyst, where it's 1-drop Flynn, Sisu, Castle, like you're asking your opponent to have multiple different cards to answer that. Like that is tough. It's not just like, oh, do they have the silver bullet, the 4 of? It's like, okay, do they have you know, silver, like 3 silver bullets in hand, basically. So I think that your deck is like way more likely to find that 1, 2, 3, 4 than your opponent is to have a responding 1, 2, 3, 4 that can actually deal with that.
Yeah. One final thing I kind of want to mention when we're talking about like openers and like something I faced a lot when I had like blind mulligan decisions. Obviously, I was playing Green Steel, and 99% of the time, the opener you want is the Diablo opener with the Bucky and stuff. And 2 games I actually tied, where I faced Hyper Aggro, and both of those times on the blind mulligan, I had my Bucky opener, my Diablo was doing all that, and I lost my first game both times because when I thought it was correct to go for that specific opener with no information. It was actually clear, obviously, after the game that I should have, tried to be going for like an Ursula damage removal, because as soon as you get 1 or 2 of those against hyper aggro, the game's just over. And then both times in game 2, I just mulliganed for that, got that damage removal, and I beat them easily. But like that was like really, really interesting to me because, it's like the idea that everyone knows in nearly every single matchup you go for your bookie line, and that wouldn't stop you from changing your line. I think it was still correct to go for the bookie opener, but like I just found it interesting, kind of like the idea of the blind mulligan. If for Emerald Steel, not really. I mean, we don't know if it's going to exist after this bookie change, but it's just interesting to see, okay, should I go for this opener when I have a blind mulligan, or should I go, the mulligan you make then once you know exactly what deck you're facing, right? So I just found that quite interesting.
Felt like I was doing hedge mulligans often in set 3, in particular with Ruby Amethyst. There were some cards that I wouldn't keep if I knew exactly what my opponent was on. But if I didn't know what they were on, there were some cards that I would keep. Sometimes like that could just be like a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of curve, where if I did know exactly what they were on, also if I knew they had like a proclivity for a certain kind of opener, I would keep some cards that I might in the past. Like maybe I would keep 2, 3 drops, or maybe I'd like prioritize keeping the crab and like mulliganing for the mini as well, because it's such a blowout on the draw or something. So it's like a multitude of things. But the TLDR of the whole concept is that the mulligan is so powerful in this game. The cards are so replacement level because they're utilized as resource and threats that you can have these like ultra consistent sort of game plans in the beginning of the game.
The next comment is from Lucky. It says, Blue Steel, run items and ward Aurora, Maurice Workbench. I think that's Maurice Workshop. I think it's Workshop. I'll smash/Avalanche as your actions. Avalanche kills Bucky and Cove. Queen's Castle, ward Aurora to help you make your Smee and other big steel cards immune to Medusa. I think that's a lot easier said than done. It's clear that yes, those cards help those specific things, but I think we've seen Blue Steel evolve a lot. I think Avalanche has seen like a little bit of experimentation. I still don't know if it's an amazing card. I know some people were trying to put it in to make the Ruby Amethyst matchup more favorable, but in Blue Steel most people are just running Rise of the Titans, which I think is fine. Like it's a fine card to answer it. And the whole idea of like, I don't know, when I think of play ward Aurora to protect your Smee and everything against everything else against like Medusa. Well, okay, let's just think of Ruby Amethyst as an example, right? You're playing against Ruby Amethyst. I'm running Aurora to protect my cards against Medusa. Ruby Amethyst has tools such as Maui and Fox that can still kill your stuff, right? It's like it doesn't completely stop. I think, yeah, sure, against some Sapphire matchups, it's like a little bit better, but like...
Yeah, I think there's a big level up here. Like, one of the biggest mistakes I see people making in Lorcana is I think they overvalue tech cards, and they don't appreciate how much they dilute the core game plan of their deck. It's just like, it just comes up so often, especially recording this podcast. Like, people will call out specific tech cards, could be even Pegasus. Like, basically, Moyen tested Pegasus. Is Pegasus effective in that matchup? Yes. But is it effective enough, and is the matchup popular enough that I can afford having this card in my deck, which dilutes my core game plan? And his answer was ultimately no. And I think that some people will look at problems that their deck has and then try to fix them and not correctly appreciate how much like the sort of pros and cons of doing so. I think a great example of this is set 3 Ruby Amethyst, the 4-0 Medusa Tremaine split. If a Tamatoa hits the board, yes, it sucks. Like, yes, you don't have the Tremaine, but Medusa hits so many more targets in the metagame that it's just like, you don't need this Tremaine, which is also going to be hit by other Medusas. You basically put yourself in a scenario where if the Tamatoa hits, I don't have to be prepared. Like, yeah, I probably lose the game. But you calculate it as, this X% scenario that happens, that I would rather just have the more applicable, better card in my deck, because overall, if I take the larger sample size of all my games and all my potential matchups, I actually have a better deck. But yes, my deck is subject to Tamatoa hitting the battlefield. Yes, I cannot do anything about it. Just because your deck cannot answer one specific thing that one specific deck does in the metagame, doesn't necessarily mean you need to have an answer to that, in my opinion.
And in a lot of metas, there's no deck that answers everything, beats everything. And then, so that doesn't mean that you shouldn't tech for anything. It's just you need to be really conscious and careful about, okay, how much am I improving this matchup? How much am I weakening some other matchups?
Our next one is from Sawyer. Says, love the podcast. Since you were talking about Scar, do you think it's a good play to pair him with the Snuggly Duckling so he could gain lore while clearing threats from the board? I had a few people just kind of talk to me about this when we were in Bochum, saying like, oh, wouldn't it be really cool to kind of do this like Giga clear with Scar and then gain a bunch of lore at the same time. I think it's a little bit of a dream at the moment, but how do you guys feel? Do you think we could see it possibly? I mean, the one thing I will say is that like I think locations right now in the meta are like quite difficult to deal with. Like the biggest thing is Queen's Castle just seems like this location that, you know, especially if you're against Ruby Amethyst, there's no clean card that can instantly deal with it unless you have like, you know, the Fox Crab stuff. Scar can't kill it, maybe can't kill it. So, you know, do you think we could see this make its way into the meta? I don't personally think so right now, but possibility.
I wish. The problem is like, so Scar is usually like a fine card on its own. The Duckling kind of doesn't do anything until you Scar, or if it doesn't do anything in the games in which you don't Scar, and then it also works with the Maui pretty well, but you need to like use it. So it's one card to ink, and then also on the turn where you move, have the spare ink to even move it into the Duckling.
Mm-hmm.
So at least on the current count of Scars, I don't think we can go Duckling. I think if you want to build a Duckling deck, I would probably have like 4 Scar, more ice blocks to facilitate the Scar hitting multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So and then because I have more ice blocks, maybe also play more of the it costs Sisu some early game so that we can like trade with the ice blocks. So it would be a different version of the deck. I don't think it's as good as the current versions of the deck, but it's fun space to try out for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think my answer to the previous question could be extrapolated to this one.
Okay.
Where it's like, yeah, I think like is that combination possible? Yes. Like, could it be good? Does it fit into the current Ruby Sapphire deck? No. I think that it's like this. This is like this thing where it's like, yeah, it is a good interaction. To what extent does it dilute my core game plan? Because I already think that Scar in that deck is niche, right? Like Moin played 1, I took a risk and I played 2, and like that's a stretch. So yeah, I don't think it's core to the game plan.
Yeah, and our last comment is from Lowly. Says, Emerald Steel killed the game for me. Where does Emerald Steel go from here? I think this comment was left before today because I hope this guy can, this guy or girl can return to the game. And has seen the news today that the squirrel has been laid to rest.
Yeah, we killed Emerald Steel for you. So
yeah, you could blame Podcana. We complained so much. Actually, wait, somebody tagged me in the Discord earlier saying, Kawa, you're finally free from playing Emerald Steel. Now that bookie's gone. So yeah, well, I'm sure we'll talk about, we're going to jump into Bochum now, talk about the deck lists. But before we close out the podcast, I will let people know what I'm trying to cook for set championship stuff. Of course, it's not going to be Ruby Amethyst because I would never give these guys the satisfaction of me playing that deck.
Bro, I literally could screenshot you saying that you're thinking about playing Ruby Amethyst after. It's like, yeah, I'm excited to see where the metagame goes from Emerald Steel. I do worry about the power level of some other decks. You know, maybe
so Ruby Amethyst is like, it's already a good deck. It loses its worst matchup. So on the surface level, the first instinct is okay. Yeah. In the little bit of time that we still have left after the errata, where we are still in this set, maybe Ruby Amethyst will be like a very strong deck. But there's some other decks that have been held back by Emerald Steel that could have a good matchup into the rest of the meta. Ruby Amethyst, I think most prominently, Emerald Amethyst has a fair shout of doing well into Ruby Amethyst, but has been held back by Emerald Steel. As one example, and I'm sure there's more decks like that are like below the surface, because when you realize, oh, this is so awful against Emerald Steel, you're like, okay, I guess I want to keep testing it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we'll kind of do a full breakdown of that metagame once that hits, sort of in the lead up to Toronto. I believe Colin was going to Toronto. I'm going to Toronto, so we'll do kind of a whole breakdown of what that metagame looks like. If I was going, this was like, hey, you got to bet money on it now. I'd probably bet on Ruby Amethyst, but I think that's a great shout, calling out the Emerald Amethyst and where that might lie. Anyway, let's dive into the list set from Bochum here. Talk about the winning list. It was, well, speaking of, it was won by Ruby Amethyst. The conversion rate and data, by the way, I don't know if any of you have it on I might have a screenshot of it. It was absolutely ridiculous.
I can pull it up. Yeah, it was 25% Ruby Amethyst. Yeah,
it wasn't Ruby Amethyst that had the ridiculous conversion rate, though.
I don't want to hear it.
Oh, it was.
My goodness!
Wait, let me pull it up. I'll try.
So, Ruby Sapphire looked like a hot pile of garbage on the day. Green Steel had one of the most disgusting conversion rates into top 64, top 32, and top 16 that I have seen. I think it was 50% across the board there, maybe less than the top 64. It was definitely less than the top 64, but it was ridiculous. So Green Steel looked like a great deck to bring. Ruby Sapphire looked like a terrible deck to bring. And then I can't remember exactly the blue steel conversion rate, but
blue steel and red purple seemed fine.
Yeah, the blue steel for top 64 was 12%, and then Ruby Amethyst was like 32%. So Ruby Amethyst, I mean, like you said, Brennan, I think if Emerald Steel, I mean, like when Toronto comes around, there's going to be a lot of things that will probably have changed. But like Ruby Amethyst just seems like a solid deck that if you get good matchups and you play it well consistently, like you've got a high chance of making the top 64.
Yeah, and the like I said, the Green Steel conversion rate was insane. So it actually looked like, I think if we ran back the same tournament a couple of days later, I think we'd have more players showing up in Green Steel. It overperformed. I was shocked when I saw that data. Not that I didn't think Green Steel was a good deck, but that was ridiculous. Some of those conversion rates in the top 64, top 32, and top 16. Let's look at this winning Ruby Amethyst list, because it does have some interesting decisions. I would say everything is pretty stock standard, but we do see the 4 Maleficent Sorceress. This is the 3 cost that comes in and draws a card. We'll see 2 Peter Pan Shadowfinder, a card that this podcast has been fond of in the past.
Not really. We were fond of the 4 cost Peter Pan.
I think we played this one too.
Also
we played this one too.
I mean,
well, I say we were fond of this one, but have we really played with it? I mean, I haven't.
Yeah,
I have.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because this was like the one that came off after, and it was like, oh, it's actually kind of does what the other one does a little bit better, maybe sometimes. I love this list. This list looks super tuned. It has the 2 tech cards for Diablo, and then other than that, it's like it's very tight. One thing to note is that a lot of these Ruby Amethysts, we already saw this trend happening beforehand. They're cutting the crab. So no crab in the list. Other than that, stock standard. And you gotta love seeing a stock standard 4 of all over the place almost list taking down the tournament. That's consistency right there. That's why you play Ruby Amethyst. It's a consistent deck. Any other thoughts on this list? We do see the 3 Medusa, which is interesting.
The Shadowfinder is not stock standard at all.
It's a 2, the 2 tech card making it in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Basically, they were just teching for their one bad matchup, and maybe in Top Cut not so much, but I'm sure this. I'm sure this at least sometimes caught some people off guard. It's not really a card that's popular in the deck, and sometimes just being able to take a favorable trade and then have it left up when it's not expected can also do a lot of work, other than just the obvious, okay, I can deal with Diablo.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah, it's like you rush into Diablo, and then if it like sticks, which it should do because their singer is down, unless they hard cast something to remove this, and you could just sing Friends with this down, it's still pretty well protected. Like it seems good, and I think like looking at what's the uninkable count of this deck roughly? Are we on 3, 6, 10, 12 uninkable? Oh no, it's like 16 uninkables, but I think it's fine. Yeah,
it's decent. No, I think it's decently low. I mean, you're talking to some big uninkable players over here. The main thing I want to talk about in regards to Ruby Amethyst is we take a look at the second place list. So I'll talk about the split on the Lady Tremaine, Madame Medusa, and how you think that should be done in the current state of the metagame. So for the second place list, we see 3 Madame Medusa, 2 Lady Tremaine. In the first place list, we see 3 Madame Medusa, no Tremaine. I would say I'm definitely more in favor of the 0 Tremaine at this point, especially because your matchup into blue-red got a lot better. And I think I would opt for either 4 Mana Medusa, or in this case 3. It seems like Mana Medusa was kind of the ones that had to be cut, which makes sense because Ruby Amethyst is like way less of a top end deck these days. Like it's much more of a low to the ground, aggressive kind of tempo deck, in my opinion. What are y'all's thoughts on Mana Medusa, Lady Tremaine splits?
I think it's interesting. It's so Tremaine helps against both Sapphire matchups, and it's easy to say, okay, yeah, but it's already good in those matchups. Okay, doesn't mean like it hurts to make it better. If it doesn't hurt the deck's like core game plan too much. It is of course true that it's like very much a tempo deck, so the cost of including those cards is a little rough. Still, it seems like in the recent tournaments or in the recent developments of Ruby Amethyst, 3 Medusa has become the norm, the default. While I do think there's also a shout to be made for 4 Medusa, because it also helps quite a bit to mitigate the Emerald Steel matchup. And it's really not bad in the Sapphire matchups to have an extra Flavasham out in the games where you do want to like outgrind them. Yeah, so there's lots of nuance to this very deck building decision, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that the B King Undisputed helps with having less Tremaines in the deck? Do you think it fills a, like, I'd say kind of a similar role to the card, or do you think it's just like, you know what I mean?
Okay, so this is a very complicated question. I don't think the deck inherently has to have hard removal or like has to have an edict effect. So then the other question is, do edicts effect have anti-synergy or synergy with more edict effects? And generally, I don't really think edict effects are inherently anti-synergetic, because a lot of the time pairing 2 edict effects with each other, or like brawl with an edict effect, makes it better. So basically, I don't think because we play Beacon Undisputed that means we don't want to play Tremaine, but it also doesn't mean we have to play them together. So it's like that's not really the reason for including Tremaine or not, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's extrapolate to the set championship. So just like actionable advice from both of you as you look towards, and Calvo, let's definitely put a pin in the list that you're going to play, but this is probably a good time to bring it up. Like actual advice for like what you would play this weekend of set championships if you're trying to get yourself some Ursulas. What deck would you be looking at? I played a set championship last weekend. I played blue-red. Did not ultimately make it, but I think if I was going to go to a set championships this upcoming weekend, which is funny enough because I did grind them last season, is it maybe for me? I'm just a bit busy with a new job and stuff like that. I believe I would play Ruby Amethyst. I think that Ruby Amethyst is disproportionately well positioned in this metagame compared to other metagames, because the green steel matchup is actually, it's fine. Yes, they can curve out in a specific way that makes it very, very hard, but I think it's an absolutely winnable matchup. I think your blue-red matchup is fantastic, and I think you can beat the current editions of blue steel as well. I like how I'm positioned in the Ruby Amethyst mirror. I haven't played it since too much since the new set, but just in general, I feel very comfortable going into like late game, like attrition based Ruby Amethyst mirrors, where you have to make a lot of technical decisions on kind of when to prioritize lore, who's the beatdown, when to prioritize card advantage. I just feel comfortable in that scenario. So weekend 2 for me would definitely be a Ruby Amethyst pick. At that, I would almost certainly net deck our first place player here from Bochum, which is, I believe this name is French. Teal time. Bouchot? I think that's it. Would most certainly neck deck them.
It's not time.
You say Teal time?
What is it? What is it?
I mean, I the first thing I can say is I'm sure it's not Teal time.
Hey, I probably got the last one right.
I can try. It's Teal team Bouchot.
Same. I mean, close. Close
like,
enough.
It's like
close
it's
enough.
like I'll say the very like it's like Timothy basically, right? Well, obviously you wouldn't pronounce it like Timothy. Yeah,
well,
time.
That's the list I would net deck.
Yeah. I think we should put some respect on Emerald Steel's name. The conversion rates have been insane. And Ruby Amethyst, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's only rising in popularity, and it is still a good matchup for Emerald Steel. So, And it doesn't have, so if your store does best of 3, because it's up to them if they do best of 2 or best of 3, if they do best of 3, then also the Sapphire decks could be a little bit problematic to bring yourself. So my shout will be Firmware Steel.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably a fair shout as well. I think Sapphire Steel has a good chance of doing well. I'm glad to see that they made it into like the top 16 and the top 4. I would be a little bit spicy and potentially try Emerald Amethyst. I think it can do really, really well into Ruby Amethyst. If you expect a lot of Ruby Amethyst, I think it could do quite well. But the problem right now is, unfortunately, I think it just does still get beat down by Emerald Steel. So if you think maybe your local metagame, there'll be like a bunch of Ruby Amethyst and maybe not so much Emerald Steel, I think Emerald Amethyst is actually quite a fine shout. And I think over time, once we reach that, once this Bucky Rad actually comes through, I think that deck will start to become a little bit better in general, unless more of the kind of like Sapphire Steel decks and Steel removal decks come creeping into the meta as well. But yeah, I think I honestly think that Emerald Amethyst was a little bit undervalued, underrepresented, and I think even to see two of them make it into, one make a top 64 and then one make a top 32 in Bochum is still pretty impressive, and it shows that the deck can do something, and in a smaller environment I think it could definitely perform. So yeah, that might be my pick honestly, but I personally haven't decided yet.
Awesome. Well, I'll include a link in the description for the links from Bochum in particular. Good luck to everybody in your weekend 2 of set championships. And we are looking forward to the Dallas-Fort Worth Lorcana Challenge. We'll keep you updated on that. If you enjoy this podcast, and one thing you do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Kawatech_CG, Moin_HS, at BrendanAPG. Those are the Twitters. Check us out, and we will see you next week.